I can hear something calling. It's calling me every day. If taking a chance is a crime, then I've got hell to pay. I've been walking the streets in my mind, trying to find a new day. Keep on searching until I will find, until I find a new way. I'm gonna say something, I hope you don't mind. It's time to rearrange. I walk round in circles, I'm going nowhere. It's time to make a change.
Hey, Tyler, how's it going today? Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Good, good, good. I'm excited to be here, man.
Yeah, it's been, I'm glad we finally were able to make this work. Been following your content on LinkedIn and really, really interesting stuff you're doing. And I think the audience will get a lot out of it. So, with that being said, how about you a brief introduction of yourself?
Okay. Well, my name is Tyler. I post content on LinkedIn. I go on podcasts occasionally. Before I delved into social media and multimedia in my 40s, I was a corporate security executive. Prior to that, I was a paramilitary. And prior to that, I had a long career in the United States Army between active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. And then I retired right at the very onset of the pandemic. And it was just kind of the right time to exit the service and do other things and quit cutting my hair and shaving my beard. And now we're here.
Yeah, well, your content is for those that don't follow you. I'm hoping that once they see this, they'll start following you because I think I I always find with your content, I get something out of it that's informative, and I'm always kind of laughing at the same time. So you have this really cool way of presenting it, and I think people will get a lot out of that also. So you mentioned your military background. I think that's a great place to start. Start with that
Sure.
transition from your military or to your civilian life. How how does that experience help in what you do now and the way that you interact with other entrepreneurs?
Sure. So my transition, I would say, in a way, was a little bit easier than some others in that, a lot of the military transition stories we hear a lot about are the folks that, did a full 20 plus years active duty, doing one thing, and then kind of reprogramming, deprogramming to either get into a W-2 job, working for someone else, get into a new career field. Maybe it's an extension of what they were doing in the military, or maybe they're following like the franchise or entrepreneur path or something like that. In my case, I think I had a little bit more of a soft landing, and it wasn't intentional. It just ended up being that way where, I did my first 4 years active duty in the Army. And essentially, I was in the Army, I think, 5 days after high school. So, I mean, I didn't have a summer off or any of that stuff. I just jumped right into it, left the family farm, and started learning how to soldier. And so I did 4 years of active duty. I guess I was and didn't really see it as fortunate at the time, but came to find that it was fortunate later is that, I got a couple of duty stations in the Army that were not deemed as super desirable, and they were kind of back to back. So I ended up getting, after I finished, engineering school, I'm a combat engineer by trade, hold a few different military occupational specialties within the combat side of the engineering regiment. So finished up basic training and then specialty school in Fort Leonard Wood, Louisiana, or Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And then after that, transitioned to Fort Polk, Louisiana. And, the name has since changed. And, there's been several installations where the name has changed. I don't know what Fort Polk is called now. To me, it's kind of always Fort Polk. But in any case, I digress. So I went there and I was in a rapid deployable unit, kind of an experimental unit at the time, the second ACR or Armored Cavalry Regiment, which was basically a very light cavalry regiment that was focused on two primary missions, high-speed mechanized reconnaissance and then also tank killing, right? So anti-armor assets. And so I was in assault and obstacle platoon within a sapper company. So in the engineering world, you have sapper companies that have a composition that's really similar to like light infantry companies, or Ranger regiment type of companies. So I was in a specialty platoon, so similar to like a weapons platoon within the infantry world, where we had equipment, we would dig in assets, those types of things, help enable maneuver, survivability, um, all of those types of things. So, and there's a huge training area at Fort Polk. It's called the Joint Readiness Training Center, and it's one of the hub premier large scale training um, areas within the United States Army. So you have the National Training Center that's out in the Mojave Desert, Fort Irwin. You have the Joint Readiness Training Center, which is going to be a little bit more woodlands, swamps, jungle centric training. And then you have the JMRC Joint Maneuver Readiness Center in Germany, and that's kind of for training specific to some of the conflict that's going on now and in that environment. So I was at JRTC, so spent a lot of time in the field, spent a lot of time on maneuvers supporting different units, both on Blue Force or friendly forces, as well as OPFOR or oppositional force. And so a lot of time in the field as a young soldier, it's like, well, this sucks. But then you kind of realize that you're getting that strong foundation that'll take you throughout your career. And then from there, I transitioned and did just shy of, I think, 13 months on the Korean border. So I got assigned to 2nd Infantry Division in Korea. And because I was a lucky guy, I ended up getting stationed, basically 6 miles off the border. So again, it's like we're going to put you in an operationally forward area. So it's probably not quite I'm going to join the military and go see the world and all these. It's like, you're going to go see the world kind of, but you're going to be out in the box and operating all the time. So that's kind of what it was. So a combination of that and just really, thinking about, using my GI Bill and going to college and then maybe coming back in as an officer or whatever was kind of the plan at the time. So I transitioned into the National Guard and spent a good many years there and then eventually retired out of the reserves. But during that time, I would say that for all intents and purposes, I professional soldier just off National Guard type of stuff for about the full time for the first 9 years of my career. And then from there, I transitioned into some overseas paramilitary work, worked as an embedded advisor in Afghanistan with a battalion or Kandak of the Afghan National Army. And then eventually that kind of spun into getting into corporate security work, where I worked with Fortune 500s, large multinational contracts, and supporting customers, security operations, and I think a little bit better than 50 countries. And so I was in the corporate world working for large security firms for a number of years. And then, recently I just decided, you know what, I want to try and give this a shot on my own. We didn't have much debt. We had our financial plans laid out, and my wife and I were talking about it. It's just like, well, you're in your early mid 40s now. Maybe now's the time to give it a shot, and at least Otherwise, you never know. So, doesn't work out, you can always go back, but I'm planning on making this thing a success. So now I work for myself. Company is called Winsley LLC, high performance coaching, consulting, advisory services firm. I do a little bit of everything, but I like to consider my firm and the clients that I work with is I'm the phone a friend when they're having their hardest day. So the tagline of our company is when the going gets tough, the tough choose Winsley. And that's for those situations where either, I have a counterpart within a corporate security department or within an operations department or human resources or whatever else who's just like, these are the rare problems that we don't get every day. So it's not part of our normal battle rhythm. And either we don't have the time to figure that out, or we just need an extra set of hands to help us through kind of these crisis situations. That's where they give me a call. And then, I'm able to leverage all of this past experience from the military and paramilitary experience throughout the years, and then also leverage my LinkedIn network. So it's pretty easy for me to start making connections through the DMs to get satellite imagery or ISR for drones and additional high-end security coverage and a lot of these other things. And what's really interesting about it too is that, Yes, I take a very satirical approach to LinkedIn, especially in my content, and I do have a lot of fun with it. And I know that in some cases I joke around and I'm a little bit nuttier than other people in my space, at least as how as I present information. And I just for me, it's like I've gotten to a point in my life where it's too short to take yourself too seriously all the time. So take your work seriously, don't take yourself too seriously. But that has really served me well. And I found to where now when I'm reaching out to people within my network, it's like, hey, I've got this thing that's going on with a client off the coast of South America, and I might need some help recovering an asset. People who are high-end people, former agency people, NSA, paramilitary, whatever else, it's like by content alone, I probably wouldn't fall into their normal channel and they're not going to be clicking on my stuff every day. But everyone has a sense for who I am, or a lot of people in my network have a sense for who I am. It's like, yeah, I like your stuff. Let's talk. Whereas, if I wasn't a blip on the radar screen, I might be, well, who's this guy and what's the angle? So I think that people appreciate that with me. It's, I don't take myself too seriously, and it's really what you see is what you get. So I think that people are more open to considering working with me or partnering with me or helping me out or likewise reaching out to ask me for help where I can help them. And so I think it's kind of finding that balance between, kind of being the professional soldier and just being a normal dude who's trying to get through the day.
Well, let me ask you this then. So for your company, Winsley,
Mhm.
obviously you talk about a lot of your military skills, how that's helped and how it influences your business model and services.
Mhm.
Without going into a lot of detail, naming specifics, could you give me a kind of paint that picture of you get that phone call? What does that entail? What is somebody asking you to help them with?
So it can be any number of things from like a strategic messaging campaign where it's like, well, I need to promote this product. I need to get into the right channels. How do I reach my ideal client profile? So a lot of those things that you hear people talking about on LinkedIn, more on the salesy side of things, it's like you have to establish your magnet to draw attention. You have to have your funnels to get people to your offer. You need that convert that offer to an opportunity and to a sale and those types of things. And what I found is that a lot of those functions where people are trying to promote, whether it's traditional marketing, guerrilla marketing, or whatever, to convert their product or service to sales to support them living, a lot of it's really very closely tied to like intelligence operations. So I spent a lot of years in tactical intelligence at the brigade, but lower battalion level, and also at the division level in some cases as well. And you find that a lot of those same activities around intelligence gathering. It relates to competitive intelligence within a business space. Same thing as lead generation and revenue generation. It relates to targeting, asset development to make contact, get access to the people that you need to get to. So a lot of those skills really translate over. And then I've also found that with that, I've been able to leverage offers either maybe I came in and helped them on like a competitive intelligence play with lead generation, right? For example, or targeting their ideal clients so that they can help them with a superior product at lower cost or whatever it is. But then when I work with them, they also they see that I'm tying it to like proven intelligence techniques. And they're like, well, what else can you do for us? So I find that in my case, it's a combination of there's definitely a business intelligence and a guerrilla marketing component to it. But then also I can find where I can pivot pretty quickly into like emergency management and planning with a client or corporate security, fractional coordination and those types of things, or vice versa, where they see that it's kind of a military inspired package that's converted to support commercial operations. And so in that in that sense, I do have challenges at time and I'm still defining that. It's like, well, what is it that I do? Because if I say, well, I do these things, or if I showed you a list of the different clients and activities that I did, even just in Q1, it's kind of a menagerie of different things, but it's like, it's just kind of how it works. And it's like, I never want to be oh, I can do whatever you want. Like I'm selling a used car. It's like, oh, this is your car just because I'm trying to sell something. But it's like, this is kind of the realm of things that I work in. And some of it just happens organically. And I mean, quite honestly, Charles, there's even instances where I've had opportunities where it's helping like a startup founder figure out, how to define their ideal client profile, how to do the targeting, generate those leads, those types of things, and showing them how to do it. And in some cases, they're just like, Tyler, this is all wonderful, but I don't have the time. Can you just do it for me? And so there are those cases too where, although I don't market myself as a ghostwriter, for the right founder or executive where we have aligned values and it's part of a comprehensive program, I will do that as well. So again, it almost makes it sound a little like I'm a guy that got an LLC without a business plan, but what I really found is it's adapting those skill sets to all these different potential opportunities, right?
Mm. And it's really interesting what you just described, because as you were saying it, I think that a lot of people would hear that and say, well, they would advise totally against the way you're doing it. They would say, no, you have to find your niche. You need to focus on one thing. What do you say to those people? Because I got to tell you, I see what you're doing on LinkedIn and talking to even a little bit, like it really is working. And I think you're probably, Tyler, honestly, I think the way you're doing it, I would say you're probably an outlier. But what would you say to those people that say, no, it won't work, you can't sustain it?
So I was born an outlier and I just got bigger. It's I'm not an intentional disruptor by any stretch. I'm kind of an accidental disruptor, and whether or not my brand of disruption is visionary or innovative, I'll leave that for other people to decide. I don't think that's titles that you can bestow on yourself. But you know, when I'll kind of distill this down to maybe like the LinkedIn content journey a little bit more. So I'm a guy that's in my 40s, just retired from the military. I was in a firm for many years that I liked working at, had upward mobility, all those things that was kind of at a point where it was positioned to be acquired, right? And maybe not a desirable acquisition, at least, in some people's view. But, so I was going to give it a shot and see, well, let's see how this goes, see what they have to offer, all those things, keep an open mind. And at the same time, I decided, maybe this is the time that I need to start building some capacity, because no one really knew who I was within the security industry. I mean, clients that I work with knew who I was. And of course, my organization knew, but I wasn't a known household name within the industry. So when I approached LinkedIn and developing a content strategy, it's like, well, I need to talk about these quote unquote niche topics, to your point, right? And it's like, this is how security officers can maximize their patrols. And it's like, well, and I tried that for a little while. Nobody liked it. And it's like, what am I doing here? That's not really me, right? And nobody cares. And plus, everyone else in the space is already doing that same thing. So I really reflect, and it's like, well, what's my niche? Because like you, Charles, I've heard that, well, you need to niche down. You need to have a niche. You need to have a niche. You know, I think your niche can be as comprehensive as you want it to be. And for me, I decided I think that my niche is going to be not niching. Obviously, you have to have a lot of self-discipline as far as not chasing down rabbit holes and chasing pots of gold at ends of rainbows that don't exist, because at the same time, I've seen people who never focused enough and they spent their whole career going to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, and in the end of it, they're like, I never made as much money as I wanted to. I did all these half-hearted jobs and jumped industries every other year, and what did I do? So I'm trying to strike a balance between developing an interesting character and an interesting and distinct offer within my space. And my space isn't necessarily a single industry space, but just working on the character development, because once you have characters that people can trust, relate to, and they're invested in, and this applies to business too. It's not just storytelling. Once you have those characters that people who matter are invested in, the storylines come automatically. So instead of trying to write a single storyline about, this is my thing that I offer, the storyline is a niche, right? I'm a character who can tell stories in iterations over and over and over, and I can help clients where they need help as that perpetual story of our commercial relationship moves forward and continue to add value rather than I do this thing, now it's done, now I find my next client and I'm worried about leads and magnets and all this other stuff again. I don't operate that way. I would rather have a few leads that I can absolutely convert and we can work together for a long time and we can solve some real problems and really move their organization forward. So that's the difference. It's character development over storylines, and it's, relatability above a niche, I feel.
It's really, really good. It was really, really well put the way you said that. And honestly, over my career and what I do, I would say I think we relate because I'm similar. And people tell me I'm wrong about this, but I've always looked at a niche as a box that would end up ending a relationship because there was nowhere to go beyond that niche. So I think what you're doing is really good from that perspective. But I think also by not playing to a niche, you're actually allowing yourself to be more truly authentic. And I think that's what people relate to. So I think kudos to you, man. It's really good what you're doing. And, I know on LinkedIn you come across and you mentioned character, right? But I don't want people to think that there's this character and it's all satire or sarcasm, right? Because I can see also with you, man, there's some real depth to you and what you do. Like I was even looking at some of the stuff, like some of the endurance challenges, right? Some of your inspirational endeavors. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think there's that side of you I think it's that side of you that allows the other side of you to be able to grow more because there is this depth to you as a person.
So there are some things that, yeah, and you're right. So LinkedIn, so I'll say this, and maybe the other socials are different. I wouldn't really know as much since, I don't really delve into the Instagram too much, or I don't have an X account or whatever, but I'll say within a LinkedIn context, and I assume that it applies to the other platforms as well, content creators age in dog years. We've all seen them come and we've all seen them go. They show up, they get excited, they look at the potential, they start giving newbie advice, just be consistent, just be authentic, and you'll crush it on LinkedIn, right? It's like, well, you're 2 months into this thing, but okay, proceed. Let's hear what you have to say. And I want to hear how your mindset develops as you have time and space. But I refer to it as the 90-day content creator cliff. And is that 90-day number hard and fast? No, it's not. But a lot of people give up, right? And they never get to that point where they've developed who they are and what their persona is enough to market their business or demonstrate their values and all those types of things. So when I talk about this, I do want to emphasize, because I do use the term character development. What I do on LinkedIn is very much just a reflection of who I am. And I say that you can look over my body of work over, the past 3.5, 4 years now on the platform, and doing this a lot longer than a lot of people make it, and still being relevant and having it not be tired, but also having templates that have kind of lasted this long. I've never had to do carousels. I've never had to do some of these other gimmicks. I don't use any other software to bold my words in my post or anything like that. And I rarely capitalize either or punctuate, just as a matter of process. I do free form what I want, but I think, through that body of work, people see that it's not a construct. It's not an act. It's just who I am. So part of that is, yes, my wife says I have a dry sense of humor. I think I have a wicked sense of humor, right? But it is sarcastic at times. It is satirical, and I like to use tools like that too. And I use them in my professional life. It's because when you add an element of satire or comedy and also self-deprecating humor, yes, I'm guilty. I do laugh at people occasionally and I joke around. I never try and be mean-spirited or a bully about it, but I do have fun, right, on the platform. At the same time, I think I probably laugh at myself more than I laugh at other people. So I use this term that, I get twice the laughs by learning how to genuinely laugh at myself. I think people say that it's one of the things, oh, you should do it or whatever, but a lot of people never do it. It's like, I gave up on being exceptional a long time ago. I'm a normal person that tries to do exceptional things. I fail a lot, but I also don't have fear of failing, and I don't have fear of sharing it on the platform. And so like anyone who's followed like some of my endurance type stuff or climbing stuff see that, I'm probably, maybe 500 record right now as far as things I succeed and fail at. But it's like once you can get over being scared of failure, you just have a lot more opportunities that open up. And, I commented on someone's post this morning about opportunities and really even LinkedIn tactics. And it's something that I said, well, I actually do this. I know this post is talking about not doing it because it's cheap or whatever. And I basically said that limiting opportunities limits opportunities. So within the realm of legal, moral, ethical, and safe, of course, if you're within that realm, I say go at it, go full spectrum, try a lot of things, figure out what you want to do. And, people might call you an idiot or say you're a weirdo for doing it, or you're an outlier, or you're too different or whatever. And then one day they start looking at it and see you're stacking those little wins, and they're like, how are they doing it? And that's really the turning point where it's people begrudgingly, okay, how are you doing this? Well, I'm doing this. And now if you'd like to work with me, we can talk more about how I do this thing, right?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like looking at your posts and when I see what you do on LinkedIn, like I love it. And I do though. I laugh to myself because I go, you know what? There would be so many people that would on LinkedIn that would say, here's an example of what not to do. And they would show your post. And then they'll scroll down a little bit and they'll see all the interaction. They'll be like, wait a second, what is that? So I think it's great. And that's again another reason why I wanted to talk to you. So well, let me ask you this though. So when you started on LinkedIn and started to do that, right? Was it always did it always go like right off the bat you started having pretty good success, or was there
Oh,
any
no.
where you were kind of like, wait a second, do I got to change the course?
Um, Well, initially, I looked at the examples that existed within the security industry. And now bear in mind that one, I started posting on LinkedIn like right really at the beginning of the pandemic. And so it's before like pandemic is kind of what really made LinkedIn take off, in my opinion, where people were deprived of the water cooler and the happy hour after work to commensurate with your colleagues. And so LinkedIn and the feed in LinkedIn, as opposed to your resume and your profile, this new different part of LinkedIn that people weren't really optimizing or using on LinkedIn like they were on other social media platforms. Um, it created that space where people could then socialize, and then all of a sudden you have coffee chats, then you have people talking about what real professionalism and redefining that and all those types of things. So when I started, there was not a lot of that. I mean, really, as far my feed was a majority still company infomercials, the McKinsey white papers, and all this other stuff. And then you had Justin Welsh, and Justin Welsh was still just doing the the 3 to 5 line hook, the 3 to 5 line body, and the 3 to 5 line CTA or call to action. So he hadn't even really evolved yet either, right? So he was a product of, he was very early. He saw an opportunity. He ended up trailblazing through that. So at the time, doing, I remember posting a first picture of like my backyard, and the post probably sucked. I mean, I wasn't very good at it or whatever, but it started to get some interest, and then people are like, it's like I recognize your backyard, and it's like just tying these little leadership lessons and whatever into it. And I'd like to think that over time that you know it got better, but it was tough for a long time. I would say for like the first 9 months on the platform, I was bomberific. Like two, three people liking it, probably more out of sympathy than anything else. But then I think the platform started to kind of catch up. I saw an opportunity to do some things that were a little bit different on the platform. where there wasn't quite as much, just more commentaries on things, was here's the white paper or here's a great opportunity. It's like those are kind of the two big things. It's like there's got to be more to it than that. So I started doing that, and I think it kind of took time to get that adoption rate. But then over time, I started to get like a multidisciplinary audience. And it's like, when I look through engagement on my post or the network that I managed to build, I see doctors, I see lawyers, I see entrepreneurs, I see, you know, senior military officers, just all soccer moms, you name it. Like they show up, and it's like, I feel like I'm getting something right here because this is a real community. It's not this homogenous monolith of this one thing, because the last thing that I want my platform to be is either digital deity worship. To me, I'm not a cult leader. I don't need followers. I connect with people, period. End of story, full stop. So that's point one. And then the other point two is that I don't want it to be this echo chamber, right? So I'll shift up messaging, I'll shift up topics to do that, just to get people thinking. And so when people reach out and say, I tune in not because I care about the security industry, I want to see what you're going to talk about next.
Mhm.
And then so I can think about those things. So I think it's about adding to the zeitgeist within the security industry. And for me, one of my focuses has been getting people to quit taking themselves so seriously, so we can start getting serious about the serious work that we need to do. And so I think I'm kind of redefining, what it means to be a professional in a very serious industry without, being a wet blanket. And then also too, it's giving some exposure to other folks where we haven't done storytelling as well as we should have about, the purposeful work we're doing. We're protecting clients, their employees, their visitors, their assets, their reputations. We're making communities safer. And yet nobody really knows. And it's some of the biggest companies in the world. Nobody knows. It's like, well, that's a problem to me. So I'm going to start talking about that. And so when people in the industry say, well, why are you talking about this? It's like, nothing here is classified. Nothing here is proprietary. And you guys have done a terrible job about storytelling. So I'm going to do it. You can watch, you can like it if you want. If you don't, you don't have to. And probably cross their fingers that I'm going to go away, and 3.5 years later, I haven't. And I actually have my first published article about LinkedIn in the security, published in the Security Journals of America. It dropped yesterday. So that's kind of a full circle. But it's like, it takes time and it's going to be hard, but you get those small wins to legitimize what it is you're doing. And eventually people are like, huh, this is just kind of the way that it is now. And maybe it wasn't so wild after all, right?
So hearing all that, I guess here's a good way to end this. So what do you say to somebody, regardless of industry, regardless, whatever, they're just starting out, they're trying to be a storyteller, I'll call it, trying to start to build a community. What's your advice to those people?
I would say, unless you get super lucky or and I'm sure there's people a lot more talented than me that are listening to do this, that'll be able to affect
Same here.
trajectory a lot faster than I was, and not stink it up for 9, 10, 11, 12 months like I did before anyone even cared about what you're doing. But develop a strong stomach for the criticism, because if you're really out on the leading edge of thought or innovation or vision within your industry or your profession or your life in general, and you're really pushing the limits of thought, the leading edge is called the bleeding edge for a reason. It's because it hurts a lot of the times. So, in kind of tying that into solopreneurship, you can have one week where you're rocking and rolling, and you're booked up and you got billable hours, and the next week it's cricket fest. So that just kind of comes along with it. So you kind of just have to take in those highs and lows and remember that you're striking an average with all of it, and stick with it. And also look for those small wins that aren't as obvious. Yeah, obviously everyone wants to put a post out. Hundreds of people like it. It goes viral. You get 10 leads off it, and you 10x your revenue, and you only work 2 hours a week, because that's like the LinkedIn dream that is getting sold. But the reality is, you're going to have times where you're going to have two people that like your stuff, and it's two friends that felt sorry for you. I mean, that was me for a long time. And no one that didn't know me was liking any of my stuff. And even to this day, I have colleagues that I've known for years that refuse to engage with my stuff, right? Whether it's public perception or whatever. But another thing too is, and this is really like, I'll even add like a tactical hack to LinkedIn and surviving that early push where it's going to be really hard and nobody knows who you are. Make sure to look at your analytics, because you're going to find those small wins in your analytics. And it's not, oh, the vanity metrics or whatever. I'm not talking about, I got 100 likes or I got 200 likes, so look how cool I am now, or I got 50,000 views off of this post. It's like, I can look at it and it's like, I posted about that article, right, that came up. Not a ton of likes, because what I'm doing is still very much outlier stuff in my industry, and it was in an industry journal, right? So people are going to look at it, it's like, oh, brother, how'd this guy get into a journal, right? Because it's a direct threat to the status quo of the way that things have been. But at the same time, I can look in the views and I look at that percentage, like, people are taking notice. They don't have to like it. They just need to see it, and they just need to read it. I like to say that views still count, and they really do. And in fact, there's nothing wrong with being an anti-hero. It makes for better stories, and you can still be a good person doing it.
Well, I think you're having a lot of success from what I can see. I'm bought in. Like I as soon as I start interacting with you, I interact with you daily now. So I appreciate it. Anything you need to plug, where people can find you, anything like that you'd like to add?
So best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I think we spent most of the time of this episode talking about that. Website coming soon. And for entrepreneurs, if you're stressing out about the website, don't freak out about the website. Yes, you should have multiple places where people find you, and I'm working on that as well. But you don't have to have a super duper website to have a Rolodex and start doing business if it's what you want to do. So put it on your to-do list, but don't make it a showstopper. So right now, LinkedIn, in the future, a website, and I'll put that on my LinkedIn so you can still find it.
Awesome. Well, I'll try to make it easy in the show notes for people to just click on a link and get right to your LinkedIn. So make it easy for them.
Perfect.
But Tyler, this has been great. I really appreciate it. And for those who watched and listened, please follow Tyler. You won't regret it. It's really, really cool, interesting, and different content that I think you all enjoy. So thank you all for watching and listening. And Tyler, thanks again. Take care.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, everyone.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening. And remember, never hibernate on your goals.